Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Nick Taylor Horror Show. Bill Moseley is an actor, musician, and horror icon. He burst onto the horror scene in a huge way as Chop Top in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, and has since starred in movies like Repo the Genetic Opera and the TV show Carnivàle. Perhaps most notable is Bill's chillingly well-realized portrayal of Otis B. Driftwood in Rob Zombie's Firefly family trilogy, which includes House of a Thousand Corpses, The Devil's Rejects, and the up-and-coming Three from Hell. Bill and I talked about his career history, and he told me a pretty incredible story about how he got on the radar of Tobe Hooper for Texas Chainsaw 2 through a short film that Bill made called The Texas Chainsaw Manicure. We also got into details about his acting process and learned how he's able to get into the psychotic mindset of characters like Otis. And of course, we discussed what we can expect from Three from Hell. Speaking of Bill was a real treat. I'm a huge fan of his, and The Devil's Rejects is not just one of my favorite horror movies of all time, but one of my favorite movies of all time. To me, it was a perfect blend of fascinating, even lovable characters in a grounded, believable, sun-scorched reality that had the Americana flavorings of classic road movies like Easy Riders and Badlands. It delivered the blood in a big way and had moments of palpably bone-chilling psychotic brutality. All of this plus a killer soundtrack. As you'll hear in the interview, Bill is an incredibly nice guy, and he was so generous with his time and his knowledge, and I was just so incredibly humbled to be able to speak to him. Now, for your listening pleasure, here's the great Bill Moseley.
Man, how's it going?
Really, really good, thanks. And how did you get into acting?
Well, I've always acted, but I come from good Midwestern stock. Dad was a Marine and was a captain of industry. Our family was mostly in trains, like railroads.
Mm-hmm.
And Dad was the head of a company that made tank cars. Still does, actually, and out of Chicago. So there wasn't a lot of encouragement. We always acted, so that was encouraged by my mom. My parents were part of a play reading group in my little hometown of Barrington, Illinois.
Oh, cool.
So there was certainly that was always available, but it was never really looked at as a career.
Mm-hmm.
So when I graduated from college, I graduated as an English major.
Oh, me too.
And my first port of call was Boston, where I ended up working as a head copywriter of a small ad agency. And that wasn't really my deal.
Right.
I then moved to New York and ended up getting a job pretty much right off the bat as the editor-in-chief of a little 32-page, it was called a magazine, but it would look like a little cheap newspaper called CB Bible. Mm-hmm. Which we printed out of an office, out of an apartment on the Upper East Side. But that was basically dedicated to the wide, weird world of Citizens Band radio.
Okay.
CB Bible.
Wow.
And so that kind of got me, got the juices flowing. And, once CB Bible, I came to work one day and there was a marshal's padlock on the door for non-payment of not only, the suppliers, but also the staff. And so I found out about, the Department of Labor and, all that stuff.
Wow.
But that kind of got me into, I then went freelance and worked for a number of publications. So that's where I began. I took a year off. I took one summer from, I think it was the summer of '84. I left New York and I went out and worked on a ranch in Cora, Wyoming, called the Box R Ranch. And during the course of that work, it was just basically summer of manual labor. And I was working one day next to a kid that had been sent out by his parents to kind of straighten him out. He was maybe 15 or 16. And his name was John Wright with a W, and he was from Geneseo, Illinois, his parents, I think they were adoptive parents, and they were they owned a funeral parlor, and they sent young John out to spend a summer of hard work. And John was a sugar freak. So John, from the bug juice in the morning and the Frosted Flakes to the Fudgsicles and the Mars bars, he was constantly pounding the sugar. And he would go into, when he would work and start sweating under the hot Wyoming sun, he would go into what I called sugar deliriums.
Wow.
And he would just, all of a sudden, this stuff would come out of him, like cartoon voices, jingles, like just crazy blather. And I would usually turn a deaf ear to it and just, dig my hole or, pound my fence or whatever I was doing. And one day he was just going on, he was doing, Captain Crunch. And then all of a sudden he said, Texas Chainsaw Manicure, and then just kept blathering on. And I heard that.
Whoa.
I went, oh, and it went right in, because I was, completely freaked out by the Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
right,
which I'd seen in Boston back in, 76. And I was really, I heard him, and I ended up going back to the bunkhouse after we were done working and writing out a scenario of a woman goes to a beauty parlor, gets her hair done, she's under the dryer, the beautician comes up, asks her what she wants, anything else, and the woman goes, yes, I'll have a manicure. And the beautician calls to the back of the parlor, manicure. And you hear this rumble of a chainsaw, the steel door, of course, the silver door slides open, and out comes Leatherface with a smoking saw. And he comes up and starts sawing on this poor lady's fingers. And she screams and passes out. And when, the beautician slaps her on the cheek to bring her back, she goes, no, oh. And she looks down and she has a beautiful manicure.
Nice.
So I ended up going back to New York after writing that little, 5-minute scenario. I went back to New York and I gathered some buddies, and we went out to Staten Island on a Sunday, to a beauty parlor called Sonia's Hair Fashions. And we shot the Chainsaw Manicure. And we ended up, I thought I was going to get some help from Broadway Video, which of course is SNL's production company. But they didn't really help. They kind of lured us in, and we ended up doing a lot of the post-production there, but then, they wanted to be paid, and that wasn't really what had lured me in there. So I ended up going to work as a waiter, just to try to make the money to pay back Broadway Video. And in the meantime, I took the manicure, which was about 5 minutes, and tried to sell it to Saturday Night Live. They didn't want it because none of their stars were in it. I tried to sell it to Fridays, which was the, ABC competition back in the day. And they didn't want it because it was a videotape and not film. So I basically just, had to eat the manicure. And I had it on VHS, of course, back then. And I got a job from Omni to come out to Los Angeles to cover the making of 2010, the Space Odyssey sequel. And when I was out in LA, I had dinner with my buddy Peter Seaman, believe it or not. And Peter was part of the Seaman and Price writing team. And they had just had a hit with Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And so they had a big, a big deal. I think they were at Paramount. And I brought along the manicure. I went and had dinner at Pete's house, and I brought along the manicure just to amuse him and his wife. And I screened it. Pete said, I love this. If you can give me a copy. I happen to have an office across the hall from Tobe Hooper at Paramount. And that was when Tobe was doing Poltergeist.
Right.
So I said, sure, take it. And he did. He walked it into Tobe Hooper's office, handed it to Tobe. Tobe queued it up and watched it. Later, I found out that Tobe called Steven Spielberg in, who was, of course, producing
Wow.
Poltergeist, and said, check it out. They both loved the Manicure, and they especially liked my cameo, which I gave myself as the hitchhiker. And because of that, and then my friend also got me Toby's home number and told me to give him a call in like a week. Mm-hmm. And so I did. When I got back to New York, I called up Tobe, and Tobe answered the phone, which I later learned was a miracle. He answered his phone, and I said, "Hi, this is Bill Moseley." He goes, "Yeah, who?" I said, "I'm the guy that did the Manicure." And he said, "Oh, I love the Manicure, Bill." He said, "Now who was the character? Who played the hitchhiker?" And I said, "Well, that was me." And he said, "If I ever do a sequel, I'm going to keep you in mind."
That's so cool.
I thought, great. And 2 years went by, and one night, 1986, early 86, I got a call from Kit Carson, who had written the screenplay for Chainsaw 2. And I ended up, he wanted my address, and so he sent me a copy of the script, told me to look at the character of Chop Top, and I did that, and I called him back, and I said, "This is hilarious, this is great." And he said, "Oh, I'm glad you like it." I said, "Well, we'll be in touch." And so the next person I heard from was from the legal department of Canon Films, offering me a contract.
Wow. And the rest is history.
That is the longest way of explaining how I got into show business.
No, that's so cool. But you were you claimed that you were traumatized by the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I had never seen anything like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
I saw it in Boston. It was a Sunday afternoon, very sunny. I saw it on the the tail end of a double bill with Enter the Dragon.
Whoa.
And this is in the afternoon at the old Paramount Theater in Boston in the combat zone.
Wow.
And there was quite a raucous crowd, and everybody, I'd never seen a Bruce Lee movie either. And everybody's, yelling at the screen, "Kick his ass, Bruce." And we're all elevated and happy. And then the opening couple of scenes and just those weird tortured violin notes of the opening of Chainsaw Massacre, and it's like the air went out of the theater.
Yeah,
it just, everybody was like, "What the?"
Yeah.
And as it proceeded, it just never let up.
No,
I'm
to this day,
like scary movies, and then you see oh yeah, there's the Mike Shadow, or something happens that you realize, okay, something takes you out of the movie.
Right.
With Chainsaw, I never did.
No,
I just got sucked in. And so it did traumatize me. And for years afterwards, I was completely traumatized. I kept trying to see it. I would see it again and again and again. That was kind of pre-videotape, or right around the beginning of video. So a lot of times I just had to go and find it in theaters. And it just, instead of it liberating me, it just made it worse.
Wow.
And really, the time I finally got away from just the trauma was when I had been hired as Chop Top. I was in Austin, Texas, at the Brook Hollow Motor Inn, where we were all staying. A car drove up with Texas plates, and out pops Jim Sedow.
No way.
The cook. And I saw Jim Sedow, and I went, "It's the cook!" That burst out of me. And he went, hey, man, how you doing? Good to see you.
That's so cool.
And in that moment, I had an epiphany, I guess, or some kind of healing, or whatever you want to call it. But I realized, holy shit, I'm one of the family.
Right.
And I think that was really what freed me more than anything.
That's cool.
Was instead of, the old, you can't lick them, join them. And,
right.
And instead of being afraid of them, now I'm one of them, and that completely made me that changed me completely.
Wow, that's so cool.
And gave me the enthusiasm, because I'd never done a movie like that. I think I'd done maybe one or two, other movies, but little obscure things. And I'd never done anything with that kind of pressure of like, oh my God, here it is, the sequel to one of the greatest, if not the greatest, horror movie of all time.
Yeah. No, that's incredible.
yeah. So that was it. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah. Wow.
And then, of course, years later, I would play Jim in, the Texas Chainsaw 3D.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. I played Jim.
Cool. So
Which I thought was weird until they told me that that they only had the rights to the original Chainsaw, and that Sony Pictures held the rights to Chainsaw 2, i.e. Chop Top. So the producer explained, we don't have the rights to Chop Top, so we'd love to have you play the cook.
Nice.
And I said, okay.
That's cool.
And
Why not?
That's a whole story in itself. Yeah, right.
So I do want to talk about Three from Hell, but first I want to talk about Devil's Rejects. I mean, personally, it's one of my favorite movies of all time, not just horror, but just in general. I loved House of a Thousand Corpses, but there's something just undeniably special about Devil's Rejects. In your mind, what was so special about that movie? What kind of made it lightning in a bottle?
I think it certainly starts with the script. It's with the characters. Like for me, it was the first time I had ever done a sequel, that I had ever reprised a role.
Mm-hmm.
So I consider House of a Thousand Corpses kind of, kicking the tires, taking a look at Otis, kind of finding Otis.
Yeah.
And then the Devil's Rejects, it was like taking Otis out for a spin.
Interesting.
Like I literally didn't really get Otis until about 6 weeks after we'd wrapped House of a Thousand Corpses. And Rob needed to add some more footage, so we did the Run Rabbit Run scene.
Right. Actually,
at the makeup studio of Wayne Toth. Rob said, we're going to do this little extra pickup because we need more material. As it is, I think House of a Thousand Corpses maybe runs 88 minutes.
Okay.
And that's with all the extra stuff that Rob had added.
Mm-hmm.
So when I did the Run Rabbit Run, that was when I kind of got Otis. And that
Very
was,
cool.
Again, after, most of principal production had ceased.
Yeah.
So by the time we did Devil's Rejects, I was already, I already knew the character.
Mm-hmm.
And Sid Haig and Sherry and I were already pals, because we did House of a Thousand Corpses in 2000, and it didn't come out until 2003. So for 3 years we wandered in the wilderness. Universal dropped us.
Right.
MGM picked us up and dropped us. It just seemed like we weren't going to get a break. And of course, there was 9/11 then. There was Columbine. So, the country, the mood, it wasn't really, conducive to putting up House of a Thousand Corpses. And finally, good old Peter Block at Lionsgate saw it and acquired it, from Universal or whatever deal was made. And, we ended up making our movie, our money back, I think, it was either opening night or opening weekend. And of course, that then paved the way. But in those 3 years that we wandered in the wilderness trying to find a distribution deal, we'd go to Rob's house for picnics, and we kind of kept the faith. And
what is a Rob Zombie picnic like?
It was actually fun. I remember one was a kind of a Polynesian theme pool party around his pool back in the good old days.
That's
where
cool.
Everybody showed up in grass skirts and 20 bats. But it was a lot of fun. But we kept together as a group because we had kind of shared adversity there.
Right.
And so by the time we actually did House of a Thousand, Devil's Rejects, we were a well-oiled unit. I think too with Devil's Rejects, what really impresses me about it is, well, again, it starts out with the story because it's a completely different movie. I mean, it's almost a different genre than House of a Thousand Corpses.
Yeah, it's more of a road movie.
House is kind of old, dark house, classic horror. Kids go to an old, dark house and, they check in, but they never check out.
Mm-hmm.
But with Devil's Rejects, everybody looks different. Baby doesn't laugh. Spaulding's out of makeup most of the time.
Right.
Otis is no longer an albino. I look more like an Allman Brother. And, with the beard, and my hair is different color. So there was this drastic change.
Yeah.
And that was that was liberating and pretty amazing of Rob. I really was impressed with Rob for, coming back to the story and yet really changing things so drastically. It's also one of those movies where everything worked.
Right.
Like the editing was, the acting, the soundtrack, like everything worked. And a lot of times you'll see movies where, 9 out of 10 things work or 3 out of 7 things work.
Mm-hmm.
And, that it hobbles the impact. But with Devil's Rejects, there really wasn't, I didn't think there really was a weak spot.
No, definitely not. So one thing that I remember hearing Rob Zombie say is that if your characters are cool, they can get away with anything. And there's something very lovable about the Firefly family. I mean, you see these characters doing these horrifically horrible things, but or in my case anyway, I might be psychotic, but I found myself rooting for them. I found myself just falling in love with these characters. The only other example of that I would say would probably be Natural Born Killers, but yeah. I'm really curious about how you were able to create Otis and how you were able to, in a weird way, just make him likable and make him cool, and how much of that was you and Rob Zombie, and what did it take to create Otis?
I really don't know. I do remember at the very beginning, before we even shot House of a Thousand Corpses, we were trying to figure out the makeup of Otis. I remember at first thinking that Rob wanted kind of his version of Chop Top, because I met Rob. I emceed a horror award show called the Igor Awards over at Universal in Burbank back in October of '99, and I came made up as Chop Top. So I emceed this horror award show in character as Chop Top, wearing a ratty tuxedo. Mm-hmm. And that's when Rob went, holy shit, it's Chop Top. And that's what got him to, his manager to call me and offer me the part of Otis. And so I figured that, that was my character, where we kind of hang on to a character kind of like, like a life preserver,
right?
In a sinking ship.
Right.
And so I really thought that that's what he wanted. And, by golly, he gently but firmly led me away from Chop Top, and I like to say that the Chop Top's in the shoulders, with the coat hanger and the scratching the head, and hey, lick my plate. It's kind of all up top, and right. Otis is right in the balls. It's all about standing firm with thumbs in the belt buckle, and kind of fuck you.
Yeah. And
also, what Rob saw was something that I never really thought of myself as is, like a sexy guy.
Right.
I relate much more to Chop Top being kind of a sketchy, funny, weird character. But Rob saw like this, kind of it had more heroic and sexy qualities.
Nice.
He had to lead me to. I did not. I didn't come by them. I didn't find them naturally in thinking about Otis. I just showed up and did what they told me to do. And, in House of a Thousand Corpses, Rob had a pretty tight rein on the script and so there wasn't really a lot of, for me, there may have been for other actors, but for me, it was a pretty tight rein. So, with Chop Top, I did a lot of improvising. With Otis, not so much.
Mm.
I did a little bit more with Otis in Devil's Rejects.
Okay.
But, it was a tight rein. And so, as I say, I was still trying to find Otis because, I'm not naturally, sexy or commanding. So that was my thought. And it took me a while to find that. And when I did, then, then out came, Devil's Rejects Otis.
Yeah.
Which was a lot more comfortable, a lot more powerful and focused.
Yeah. Now, I'm curious about your acting process in finding Otis. I mean, he seems to have a dash of Charlie Manson in him. Did you research serial killers a fair bit, or how were you able to kind of get into character?
I didn't research. I've certainly read Helter Skelter,
mm-hmm.
But I did actually go online. I think it was probably after I played Otis, but I went online and was looking at some Charlie Manson. There was one particular interview with Charlie Rose. And I remember Charlie Rose looked at Manson and said, who is Charles Manson? And he said, what did he say? I'm a boxcar. I'm a roll of nickels. I'm a razor if you get too close. And I just thought, God, that guy is fucking poetic. So I identified that, a boxcar, a roll of nickels, and a razor if you get too close. And I just thought, that's fucking cool.
That is
pretty
cool.
I didn't really have, Charles Manson in mind. In fact, it's funny, back in 1990 or 91, I did a play here in Los Angeles called Timothy and Charlie, which was based on an actual, I think it was one night when Timothy Leary and Charles Manson were side by side in solitary confinement.
Oh my God.
And the play is based on that. And then, Charles Manson offers Timothy Leary some acid, and, it's a crazy, wonderful play.
Oh, that's pretty insane.
I didn't play Charles Manson. I played Timothy Leary. So Charles has always been close, but, I never, that wasn't really how I researched the character.
Gotcha.
I don't think I really did research the character. A lot of times what I do is I just, think my philosophy of acting, I guess, is just read the script a bunch of times, and think about it. Just get comfortable with the relationships of the different characters, and and then serve the production. If the director has some ideas, great. If not, just say the words and move one foot in front of the other, and see what happens.
Yeah.
I wish it were more mystical than that.
No, sometimes simpler makes all the difference.
Because people, some people say, well, oh my God, how hard is it to you to get to that dark place? And I think, well, really not that hard. And, and it's not about getting to the dark place. It's about getting back. But, by the time you get home with, two young children.
Right.
It's like, let's leave, Otis, down in the car.
Right.
Don't want to get home and start, freaking everybody out.
No, of course.
So I'm not a method actor as that stuff goes.
I gotcha. Yeah, I remember hearing that there was a scene in Rejects that you particularly emotionally had a really tough time getting through because it was just very brutal. I think it was the hotel room scene, and then Rob Zombie turned to you and said, "Art is I think it was something like art is dangerous or art is unsafe."
No, art is not safe.
That's it. Art is not safe. Yeah, that was.
And, it was so helpful because, well, of course, because a lot of times, we know that the chainsaw is rubber or it doesn't have a blade or, we know from special effects, from hanging out with, spending too much time with Tom Savini that
right.
It's a blood pump right off screen. And that a lot of it is, foam rubber. But then there are scenes like the scene with Priscilla Barnes in the Kahiki Palms motel room where, you're just there. It's, you're not kidding. I mean, you're really,
right.
Doing the things you're doing. And, it certainly, I would hope it would make just about everybody uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's not how I roll.
No, of course.
And what was tough about that scene was not only the actual, what I had to do in the scene, but also the fact that it comes from boredom. Like we've been waiting for we're waiting around for Captain Spaulding, and we've taken over the room with Banjo and Sullivan and their wives, and we're, me and Baby, and we're sitting around, we're waiting. There's no air conditioning. The TV's on. There's Buck Owens, and it's just we've been probably there for a couple of hours, and it's just all the excitement is worn off. It's just fucking boring.
Right.
And so out of that comes Otis saying, "Okay, Mama, take it off." And so, a lot of times it's easier to do a scene like that when you jump out of a closet and you've got that energy and you're going to knock her on the head or rip her clothes off. And, all of that kind of energy makes it easier to do, those brutal acts. But when you're doing it just out of sheer boredom, that really exposes Otis as just, a diabolical thinker.
Yeah.
Just like, that's how Otis gets through his boredom.
Right.
And, of course it was very, but you just have to, you have to go for it. I mean, that is the thing. I mean, with acting, good acting, sometimes you just come to that, it's like in the third Indiana Jones when he has to walk across the invisible bridge, to the Knight Templar.
Right.
Sometimes you just have to put that foot out there and say, okay, here we go.
Yeah.
And that's basically what happened. What's funny about that, and then, we did that scene, Rob said, cut, I walk off the set. A lot of the women in Video Village are, visibly upset. My stomach is in knots. It was a bummer.
Yeah.
And as it should be. And that's when I said to Rob, like, oh man, I feel bad. And that's when he said, art is not safe. And what that told me was, we're not just making a stupid horror film sequel. Like a lot of them, really come from more of a cynical place than a creative place. That like, well, shit, if we can do, half the business that first one did, the kids will eat it up. That kind of attitude. And what Rob told me was that Devil's Rejects was not a simple horror movie sequel, that we were going for something special.
Yeah.
And, and I don't think it had ever occurred to me that art wasn't safe. I guess I had just come from the Midwest where they're at every, the end of every checkout line of the supermarket, there are the velvet paintings with the kids with the giant eyes, those sad little children. I wasn't, I've been exposed to some great stuff, but for some reason, it never challenged me like that moment did. And when he told me that, it just it was the best thing he could have said, because I had to go back and do it 20 more times.
Oh my gosh. Whoa.
You have to go in there and do take 2, and then here's another setup, and then it's his POV, her POV, the ceiling cam, the 2-shot, the master, oh my God.
Yeah.
And each time it was different, and each time it was exciting.
Right.
And it didn't get boring. It was always raw. And Priscilla Barnes, God bless her, she told me later that it was the greatest acting experience she'd ever had.
Oh my gosh,
that's
amazing.
I really appreciated that, because she'd worked with Jack Nicholson in Crossing Guard, and I mean, I don't know, Three's Company is was the pinnacle. But, she's not a newbie, certainly, and so I really appreciated that, because it was an amazing scene. I'm certainly proudest of that.
Yeah,
but just really for walking through it, and and just being, letting go of all this stuff that was saying, no, not this. This is wrong.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So I was going to say last couple of questions. So 3 from Hell, Firefly family is coming back. So why are they coming back now? What prompted this third sequel, or this second sequel?
I have no idea.
Oh, no?
I will answer not coyly when it's a Rob Zombie question.
Okay, got it.
That would be a Rob Zombie question.
Okay,
I really don't have any idea, because it is. I think it's 14 years.
Wow. Yeah.
And so what that means, I don't know. I don't know if that means that finally a good story manifested itself in Rob's consciousness. I really don't know, but I'm glad.
Me too. I've been dying for it. I thought they were going to come back with a prequel to see what all the Firefly family had done for, years before, or Otis and Baby as children, God forbid. But I'm pretty happy with the sequel too. To get Sid Haig back, that's pretty cool. So I'm sure you're sworn to secrecy about a lot of details, but what can you tell us about 3 from Hell that you're particularly excited about?
Well, I can tell you another one of those moments, not quite a Priscilla Barnes moment, but there was one scene, in the first couple of days of shooting. I have a scene where I have to say a bunch of words, let's put it that way. And we did a couple of takes of it, and I kept dropping my lines. So I'd go off and, start emoting, and then I would, to get tongue twisted. And it's okay. First time, that happened. Second time, okay. And I'm just kind of getting the eye from the director, like, dude, And, and I said, yeah, give me a second here. And I sat down and I realized that I was getting too actory. I was getting self-conscious. I was just, kind of thinking about what are they looking at? What are they thinking of me? I don't know. For some reason, it was a self-conscious moment. And I heard this voice in my head say, Bill, go over there and sit down. I got this. And it was the voice of Otis. And, as soon as I realized, get out of the way, Hollywood actor.
Right.
We don't need you. We don't need your self-critique. Just get out of the way.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I did that. And, I never looked back. Just had a great time. And, I sat it out basically.
That's cool. So
sometimes just let Otis, have his time.
No, I think that's huge. I think sometimes the artist has to get out of the way of the actual work. I think that's a huge part of it.
Get out of the way.
That's great.
Unless you're coming in with something awesome and contributing, to the betterment of the scene, get out of the way.
Yeah. And
that's really hard, especially, with a lot of, movie and TV actors. It's sometimes it's all about expressions, like they love how I smile. It's like, dude, if the story isn't telling you to smile, if you're not smiling because you're reacting to whatever reality you're in, cut it out.
Right.
Right. If you're like trying to push somebody aside so you can, get more of your face on camera, cut it out.
Yeah. There's a lot of that.
That's what's fun about working with Rob and, I really have not experienced that. And that's, I think probably speaks more to the spirit of low budget independent films than maybe anything.
Yeah.
That seems to be where I'm, my roots are happiest.
That makes a lot of sense.
And that kind of acting thing. I mean, that's when you just fucking go for it. And that's the way I like to do it.
Yeah. Gotcha. So this is kind of a silly question, but I can't help myself. So there's been a lot of rumors about a Nightmare on Elm Street reboot, and everybody's first choice, if they had to recast Freddy Krueger, is you. Have you gotten into any official conversations about that? Or is this just strictly rumors and fan speculation and fantasizing?
That's rumors, fan speculation, et cetera. It's certainly flattering to be, thought of in those terms, but I would only want to see, I would want to see Robert Englund. I mean, I see him at the different conventions, some of the conventions I go to. He's hale and hearty, man. I think he'd be fine. I don't know why, they've kind of pushed him off the stage because, I mean, he is Freddy.
Yeah. Yeah. Now he seems like he's ready to go.
Yeah, he's like in great shape.
Yeah.
Great form. He's funny as hell. He's really, fired up. He's great at conventions. He's, does, funny photo ops and, he's always into it, and I have no idea why anybody kicked him to the curb in the first place. And
no, it doesn't make sense.
I mean, the Elm Street that came out a couple of years ago, Jackie Haley, God bless him. But, why is Robert not just still cranking him out?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
No, I'd love to see it. I mean, I think my magical pitch would be get Rob Zombie to direct it and get Frank Darabont to write it, because Frank Darabont did The Dream Warriors, which was amazing. And just have a really killer story and bring Robert Englund back. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yes, I remember auditioning for Frank one time for Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, wow.
And Frank was partners, I think, with Dream Warriors. I think that might have been Chuck Russell who directed it.
Yeah, Chuck Russell directed it.
They were partners.
Yep.
And I ended up, the first job I got in Hollywood when I moved out in '86 was I got a job on The Blob.
Oh, that's right.
Because I had a friend who was, like soldier number 3 or something in the sewers with a hazmat suit. And he got some kind of a Clint Eastwood job. He got some kind of a job so that he couldn't do it. So he recommended me, and they were in the middle of production. So for some reason, I got this call, and they invited me up to Valencia, and they were shooting in Valencia Studios. And I went into, Chuck's office, and he, took some break and came up, and I did this great audition. And he looked at me and said, "Can you start tomorrow?" And I said, "Sure." So I went home, and I remember with my, my girlfriend and our 2-year-old daughter, we started doing kind of a bossa nova dance line, dancing around the apartment going, "I got a job on the blog. Yeah. I got a job on the blog. Yeah."
That's awesome. So last question. So you've been a horror fan for a while. You yourself are a horror icon. You've worked with people like Tobe Hooper, Rob Zombie, and Darren Lynn Bousman. What excites you in horror today?
Well, I thought I can certainly cite some of the recent movies that have really fired me up. I would have to say absolutely Get Out.
Yeah.
I thought Get Out was fantastic. That fired me up. I got fired up by, I liked Annihilation, not quite a horror movie. I liked Hereditary. It was pretty darn good, especially when, we see somebody climbing on the ceiling.
Yeah.
So I won't go into spoilers. But I think that there is plenty of good horror. I think, what I love about it is that the lower the budget, the harder you have to work and the more imaginative you have to be. So there's never an end to good stories. I loved Let the Right One In.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's so funny because my wife, Lucinda, and I, a couple of years ago, went to that very town in Sweden, a town called Luleå.
Oh, really?
Lulea. And there was, there in the middle of town is the public pool where, Let the Right One In.
Oh, wow.
Filmed in part. So it was very exciting, for me as like a horror tourist. I was there to make a short horror film called Fish, directed by Martin Allen, Ahlin, who's really got some amazing things. If you ever look him up on YouTube, he's done some amazing short films. But there's always, that's another reason that I love, low budget independent horror. I get to work with a lot of young directors, and, there's some really great ones out there. I don't know if they'll, what kind of opportunities they'll have. But I think it's really great that there is, of course, the YouTube and, all the social media and these different platforms where a lot of new talent can actually, get an airing of, all of their cool stuff and their cool ideas.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, again, that was the miracle to me, was that I ended up getting the Chainsaw Manicure in front of Tobe Hooper. It would have been a lot easier if I could have just said, yeah, just, go to YouTube and check it out. It had to go through a lot of, miraculous hands, but nowadays I think there are these platforms where, people can still make cool movies, even if you have an iPhone and, an old barn and, a couple of friends and a bottle of ketchup, you could do it.
Right. Right. Now, I forgot to ask, what else are you working on nowadays?
Right now I'm working on a new music project. There was a band called War Beast, and they are on the Housecore record label, which is Phil Anselmo's label. And I worked with Phil a couple of years ago on, Bill and Phil, Songs of Darkness and Despair, which is available on Housecore.
Nice.
And iTunes, I guess. The band War Beast just lost their lead singer, Bruce Corbett, and to throat cancer.
Oh, man, I'm sorry.
They have been talking to me, the guitar player and bass player have been talking. So we're kind of doing an internet band called Mr. Machine, based on the old Ideal toy. And, so we're putting together, an EP and seeing what happens.
Oh, that's great.
It's music by internet, which is very strange. Usually I like to, get in there and, bang around with, people in person. But it's been fun. And, that's it. I've got a, busy convention season. And of course I'm, kind of polishing my toenails for 3 from Hell when it finally comes out, I think sometime this fall.
Right. Couldn't be more excited about it. Well, great.
Well, Rob is excited, and that makes me very happy.
Oh yeah? Is he hard to excite?
I mean, I don't think so, but I think that, I think it's something that's really put an extra, pep in his step. And I think it was a great experience for him to, get the gang back together.
Yeah.
And, it's, I'm sure, Sherry did a great job. So, it's kind of fun. It energizes you.
Yeah, of course.
And for me, after, doing Devil's Rejects and having such a wonderful experience, that was a long time between films. So for me, it was very exciting to hear that we were getting the band back together. And also, it was once I, got out of the damn way, it was like pretty much there was Otis. He really hadn't gone too far in all those years.
That's so cool. He was
right there and ready to go. That's
amazing. Well, I can't wait to see it. And Bill, I really, really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
All right. Big thanks to Bill for taking the time. I really enjoyed that conversation. So here are 3 key creative lessons learned from this conversation with Bill Moseley. Number 1, make stuff and put it out there. Bill was a struggling actor who, on a whim, made a fun short film in a single day with his buddies called the Texas Chainsaw Manicure. With very little expectation of it getting much recognition, Bill sent it around multiple networks, and somehow it got in front of Tobe Hooper, who then cast Bill as Chop Top in Texas Chainsaw 2. This put Bill on the trajectory of being the horror icon that he is today. So it's important to make stuff and put it out because you never know. Number 2, get out of the way. When filming 3 from Hell, Bill began screwing up Otis's lines because he was overthinking the performance and becoming insecure. After take after bad take, Bill suddenly heard the voice of Otis in his own psyche telling him to get out of the way and let him do his job. Bill said that he sat the performance out at this point and let Otis take over, which made the performance go so much smoother. So this idea of getting out of the way is relevant to most artists, not just actors, who will often stifle the flow of their own creativity by overthinking the material and finding reasons to feel self-conscious. This may be part of being human, but it's destructive to the creative process. Sometimes the best way to serve your art is to get the hell out of its way. Number 3, art is not safe. During a particularly brutal hotel room scene in The Devil's Rejects, you know the one, Bill struggled to get through the large number of takes and mentioned to Rob Zombie that he was emotionally struggling to get through the performance. Without skipping a beat, Rob Zombie replied, "Art is not safe." This means that working in horror and other darker arts can take an emotional toll on those involved when it's taken seriously. It's supposed to do that. Yes, there are those goofy, schlocky slashers and exploitation films that exist for cheap thrills and entertainment. I love a lot of them, but then there's another type of horror that is meant to portray larger truths about real evil. Sometimes the only way to properly depict evil is to confront and embrace the inherent danger that comes with exploring it. That's exactly what Bill did, which is probably why Otis is such an effective character and probably why he's still stuck in Bill's head. Anyway, guys, thank you again, as always, for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to me if you could share it with your friends and family on social media. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. Thank you again for listening to the Nick Taylor Horror Show.